The Bible is not only a book of comfort and doctrine, it is a practical manual for how to live well with what God entrusts to you. What you do with money reveals what you worship, how you steward gifts, and how you position yourself to be used for good. Today, we'll walk through what I call the Bible's millionaire strategies, principles that transform fear into faith, scarcity into stewardship, and anxiety into disciplined hope. Stay with me until the end. If this message lands on your heart, subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next practical teaching. Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a stack of envelopes and the smell of burned coffee still in the air. His laptop glowed a tired blue. The numbers on the screen looked like a foreign language. He had been raised in church, learned that God cares for the poor and the widow, and believed in provision. Yet the pressure of bills, a mortgage due in 2 weeks, and a small business that had yet to catch steady momentum left him sleepless. Across from him, his wife Anna traced the rim of her cup with a finger and said, "We have to do something different, not just hope." That longing to do something different is the starting place for every practical step. The first move is inward. The Bible speaks often to the heart before it speaks to the wallet, because what you believe about God's provision shapes what you will do with your resources. Think of this as mindset. You align your thinking with the truth that God is a provider and that your role is to steward, not to hoard or panic. When you choose a mindset of provision, you are not adopting naivete. You are anchoring your decisions in truths that steady your actions. Remember that Scripture promises God's provision in context of trust and obedience. Philippians 4:19. That means you do not wait passively. You plan, seek counsel, and work with diligence. Practically, start by writing 3 beliefs you will commit to each morning. God provides, I will steward well, and I will act with wisdom. Speak them aloud, declare them, because words shape your resolve. Stewardship follows mindset. In the parable often called the talents, servants are entrusted with resources and commended for faithful management. Matthew 25. Stewardship recognizes that everything you have is entrusted to you by God and expects a response. Stewardship is not merely budgeting. It is arranging your life to honor the giver. That might mean restructuring priorities, saying no to what steals your margin, and saying yes to disciplined giving even when your bank balance feels thin. Take a practical step this week. List your top 3 recurring expenses and ask whether each one aligns with kingdom priorities. If you are running a small business like Ethan, set up a separate account for tithe and generosity and another for operating expenses. Accountability follows stewardship. Proverbs speaks to the value of knowing well the condition of your flocks and herds. Know well the condition of your accounts. Prov 27:23. Monitoring is not legalism, it is faithfulness. Track every inflow and outflow for 30 days. Use a simple spreadsheet or an app. The tool is less important than the habit. Generosity is a thread that runs through the Bible as both command and blessing. Scripture challenges the hoarder and honors the generous. Malachi 3:10, Luke 6:38. But generosity is not a formula to leverage God. It is the posture of one who trusts. When you give, you acknowledge God's ownership and refuse to be defined by scarcity. Practically, start small if you must. Commit a percentage, set up an automatic transfer on payday, and give without public fanfare. As Anna once told Ethan during a low season, we are not giving to be seen, we are giving to be shaped. Saving and investing are not opposed to faith. They are expressions of prudence. Proverbs celebrates the wise man who stores a little in summer for the lean times. Prov 6:6-8, 21:20. Ecclesiastes even suggests diversification. Cast your bread upon the waters and let it return in unexpected ways. This means building buffers, a small emergency fund, a retirement plan, and a basic awareness of diversified opportunities. Begin with a habit. Save a fixed percentage of every income. If you can start with as little as 5%, increase gradually. Teach your children this rhythm. Habits compound across generations. Debt requires a sober voice. The Bible warns that the borrower becomes a servant to the lender. Prov 22:7. Debt itself is not inherently sinful. Some debts are tools, but unwise debt that enslaves is a spiritual and practical danger. If you find yourself burdened, resist quick-fix promises and instead prioritize high-interest obligations first. Negotiate where you can. Call creditors, explain your plan, and seek counsel. If you are tempted by buy now, pay later, consider the long-term cost. Start by listing debts from highest to lowest interest and commit to paying an extra amount toward the highest while maintaining minimums on others. Work is dignified labor. Scripture commands diligent hands and warns against laziness. Proverbs 10:4, Colossians 3:23. Your vocation is a ministry field. Excellence honors God and opens doors. For Ethan, that meant treating his business not as a side hustle, but as a stewardship field. Better customer service, clearer bookkeeping, and creating value that customers gladly pay for. Practical action. Set one weekly goal that advances your work. Acquire one new client, improve your product, or learn one skill that raises your value in the marketplace. Budgeting and planning are acts of foresight. Jesus taught counting the cost before building. Luke 14:28. Budgeting is not punishment, it is freedom. It turns anxiety about money into action. Create a simple plan. List income. Assign every dollar a job, and leave a margin for unexpected costs. If you are married, do this together. If you are single, bring your plans to a trusted friend or mentor. A budget is not static, adjust it monthly. Small corrections compound into long-term freedom. Contentment is a muscle. Paul speaks of learning to be content in every circumstance, Philippians 4:11-13. And Timothy cautions that godliness with contentment is great gain, 1 Timothy 6:6-7. Contentment does not mean complacency. It means an internal peace that reduces the compulsion to chase what will never satisfy. Cultivate gratitude practices. Each night name 3 things God provided, large or small. Replace comparison with thanksgiving. If you find yourself caught in the treadmill of more, pause and ask whether the pursuit honors God or feeds an empty place in the heart. Legacy thinking flips your time horizon. The wise leave an inheritance for their children's children. Prov 13:22. Legacy is not only about wealth, but also about patterns, generosity, and faith handed down. Think in decades. What financial rhythms do you want to imprint on your family? Teach your children the basics of money. Involve them in age-appropriate giving, and begin to imagine assets that serve others beyond your lifetime. Plant a seed today that your grandchildren will water. Words have power. The scriptures teach that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Prov 18:21. Faith-filled declarations are not incantations, but spoken convictions that align your will with God's promises. Mark 11:23. Speak truth into your finances. Declare provision, not presumption. Declare wisdom, not panic. Replace fear statements with faithful confession. Instead of, "I'll never get out of debt," say, "I am committed to faithful steps to reduce what I owe and steward what I have." Relationships matter more than spreadsheets. 2 are better than 1 because they help each other succeed. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10. Surround yourself with wise counsel, a mentor, a pastor, a financial counselor who understands faith and finance. Community creates accountability and multiplies resources. Ethan learned this when he joined a small group of entrepreneurs who met weekly to pray, exchange ideas, and review one another's numbers in a spirit of love. That circle helped him change habits faster than trying alone. Perseverance is the final thread. The Bible calls faith the assurance of things hoped for, and asks believers to run with endurance. Hebrews 11:1, James 1:4. Change rarely looks dramatic at first. It shows up as steady steps, consistent giving,
monthly savings, weekly planning, small business improvements. When discouragement comes, remind yourself of the practices you've started. Keep records of small wins, a debt paid off, a month of savings, a generosity moment that felt costly but joyful. Illustrations help make these principles human.
Several years ago, a woman named Miriam sat in my office with trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks. She had a town store bakery she loved, but a sudden storm had destroyed equipment and creditors were knocking. She told me she felt abandoned. We wrote a plan together, a short-term emergency appeal to her community, a temporary pivot to wholesale for local coffee shops, a restructured payment plan with the supplier, and a daily practice of reading scripture to remind her of God's presence. 3 months later, her bakery reopened with a steady rhythm, not because the storm was easy, but because she acted and trusted. This is not a guarantee for each person. It is a picture of faith exercised through action. You may be thinking, how do I begin today? Start with a single realistic action. If anxiety is your voice, respond to it with one practical countermeasure. List your monthly income and fixed expenses tonight. If you struggle with giving, set one recurring gift even if it is small. If debt feels like a mountain, call one creditor tomorrow to ask about options. If your business needs a nudge, commit to one marketing action this week. Small, faithful acts form a highway for larger change. A question often comes up about tithing and generosity. Is giving always the right step when I'm financially tight? The Bible celebrates generosity and promises that God can bless such obedience, Malachi 3:10. But generosity must not be an excuse for financial irresponsibility. If you are under predatory debt, seek counsel and prioritize getting out of that trap. Generosity can take many forms, not only money. Time, skills, hospitality, and mentoring are valuable. If you can't give financially today, give in other faithful ways and prepare to give more as God increases you. Ethan and Anna took these steps in small increments. They created a one-page budget, set up automatic transfers for savings and giving, and agreed to small weekly business goals. They met with a trusted mentor who helped negotiate a short-term forbearance with their mortgage servicer. They practiced gratitude nightly, speaking aloud the small provisions that showed up. Over the course of a year, their stress did not vanish, but their trajectory changed. They were not millionaires yet, but their life had a new architecture. Faith-shaped habits, practical planning, and generosity that brought both tension and joy. Now consider the metaphor of seed and harvest. You plant consistently, trusting that some seasons yield little and some seasons yield abundance. The Bible's economic logic often looks agricultural: sow, tend, and wait. But planting without tending, mindset without monitor, giving without planning often fails. The millionaire strategies in the scriptures are holistic. They combine inward belief, outward action, and community accountability. They are not a shortcut to wealth, but a pathway to stewardship that, when obeyed, tends to produce fruit.
You will encounter obstacles, cultural messages that equate worth with net worth, lenders that profit from your desperation, and seasons that expose vulnerability. Address these with both spiritual and practical tools. Spiritually, renew your mind. Claim truths that combat identity tied to money. Practically, set boundaries. Unsubscribe from apps or stores that tempt you. Lock away credit cards if necessary. And create friction before purchases. Wait 24 hours before a non-essential buy. There will also be moral hazards. The love of money is warned against explicitly. Wealth gained by injustice corrodes the soul. So evaluate income streams with integrity. If a path to quick profit requires deception, exploitation, or compromise of your values, refuse it. The long-term cost to your conscience and community outweighs the short-term gain. Build wealth in ways that dignify others and reflect the justice and mercy of the Creator. In the weeks ahead, you can deepen this work. If you're hungry for step-by-step help, set aside an hour this weekend to draft a 30-day plan. List your 1 immediate financial priority, 3 actions you will take, and 1 person you will ask to hold you accountable. Invite prayer into this plan. When you connect practical steps with spiritual discipline, you no longer walk alone. There are practical techniques that deserve mention because they yield results without fantasy. Use an envelope method for discretionary spending if you are tempted to overspend. Create an emergency fund of at least 1 small month's expenses and grow from there. Automate savings so you don't rely on willpower alone. Prioritize high-interest debts and consider consolidating if it lowers the cost and increases clarity. Educate yourself slowly about basic investment principles, diversification, long-term horizons, and low-cost options, while seeking trusted counsel. At this point, imagine a brief scene. It is a cool morning, light filtering through a kitchen window, and you stand with a fresh mug, a pen, and a single sheet of paper. You write down 1 promise to God and 1 practical step you will take this week. It could be as simple as, I will track every expense for 30 days, or I will give a small, consistent gift. That combination of spiritual commitment and tangible action is the hinge upon which change occurs. As the teaching moves toward application, you may wonder about bold faith moves. Should you risk launching a dream business? Should you invest in a ministry idea that seems impractical? Faith calls for courage, but not for recklessness. Before you make large leaps, counsel with wise believers, prepare contingencies, and ensure your household has basic protections. Faith multiplies when combined with planning. God honors bold obedience. Often that obedience includes a careful plan, a saving buffer, and an accountability circle. Ethan's business eventually reached a point where a key client offered a larger contract. He and Anna prayed, counseled with a mentor, and then accepted with a conservative plan to hire 1 part-time helper and to maintain reserves. They celebrated with their small group and set aside a portion of the unexpected income for generosity and for reallocating toward long-term goals. Their story is a reminder. Opportunities will come. Prepare so you can steward them well. There are also deep spiritual practices that support financial growth. Regular fasting and prayer to seek clarity on priorities, sabbaticals to reassess work-life balance, and retreats to listen to God's direction for giving. Combine these practices with weekly habits. Review your budget every Sunday evening and discuss it with your spouse or accountability partner. These rhythms make stewardship a lifestyle rather than a periodic panic. Before we move deeper into tactical steps like specific budgeting templates and negotiation scripts you can use with creditors, pause and take a breath. Let the primary truth sink in. God's economy values faithful stewardship more than flashy returns. The strategies that create sustainable wealth in biblical terms are long-term, relational, prudent, and generous. They honor God, bless others, and protect your soul. If you want concrete templates, next we will walk through a sample 30-day budget, a basic debt snowball plan you can adapt, and phrases to use when asking creditors for mercy. We will also explore simple investment concepts tailored for beginners and how to teach these ideas to your children. But before we get to those practical scripts, there is one more posture to consider, one that ties all previous points together and prepares you for decisive action. Covenant commitment. A covenant commitment is not merely a resolution. It is a vowed way of life. It is the moment when you and God agree that your resources will serve more than personal comfort. They will serve kingdom ends. Covenant shapes character. It changes the language you use about money, from mine and I to we and steward. Covenant also invites accountability, public or private, to ensure fidelity. Ethan stood again at his kitchen table months later. The envelopes were neater now, the laptop screen less accusatory. He looked at Anna and said, "We aren't there yet, but I can see the path." She reached for his hand and squeezed it.
We're learning to give first and plan second, she smiled, and to keep our eyes on what lasts. Their small steps had created a new pattern, a rhythm that would, with perseverance, produce both stability and the capacity to bless others. Now, as we prepare to move into the detailed, practical templates, numbers you can adapt, scripts you can use, and small wins to track, take a moment to write down 3 commitments. 1 belief to hold, 1 action to take this week, and 1 person to invite into your accountability circle. Guard these commitments. They are the scaffolding for what comes next. Keep them where you can see them daily.
When you are ready, we will walk through a simple 30-day budget you can customize for your household, a phased plan to tackle debt that honors dignity and mercy, and language to ask for help without shame. We will also show how to set up an automatic generosity plan that protects both your heart and your bottom line. For now, breathe, decide, and prepare your pen. The next steps will be practical, precise, and compassionate. Tools for the faithful life of stewardship. Begin with a 30-day budget, a simple frame you can adapt. 1. 30-day budget template. Use percentages or actual numbers. Step A. Income. Write your total net income for the coming 30 days. All paychecks, side gigs, predictable receipts. Step B. Priorities. Use these as a starting point, adjust for your context. Giving, generosity, 10%, or the amount you have pledged. Savings, emergency fund, 10%. Housing, rent, mortgage, insurance, property costs, 25 to 30%. Food, groceries plus modest eating out, 10 to 15%. Utilities, phone, internet, 5 to 10%. Transportation, fuel, maintenance, transit, 5 to 10%. Debt payments, minimums plus extra, 10 to 20%. Personal, family, clothing, small medical, child needs, 3 to 5%. Buffer, MISC, for irregular expenses, 2 to 5%. Example, family with net $4,000 per month. Giving, $400. Savings, $400. Housing, $1,000. Food, $480. Utilities, $200. Transport, $200. Debt, $600. Personal, $120. Buffer, $100. How to use it. Fill the sheet for the next 30 days. Put every expense on paper first. Move categories until the totals equal your income. If you're over, cut discretionary lines first, eating out, subscriptions. If under, look for short-term increases of income or delay non-essential spending. Review weekly. Each Sunday evening, check actual spend versus plan and reallocate the buffer if necessary. Small weekly corrections prevent big month-end surprises. 2. Phase debt plan. Debt snowball with dignity. Phase 1. List every debt smallest to largest. Ignore interest for ordering and snowball. Record balance, minimum payment, interest. Phase 2. Make all minimum payments. Choose a snowball target, the smallest balance. Phase 3. Apply any extra funds to the snowball target while keeping others at minimum. When the target is paid, roll that payment amount to the next smallest. Phase 4. Celebrate small wins. Paying off a single card is a spiritual and practical milestone. Example script for negotiating with a creditor. Use calm, factual tone. Opening. Hello, my name is name. I'm calling about account number. I've been a customer since year, and I'm working on a plan to bring the account current. Explain hardship briefly. We experienced lost hours, medical expense, client delay, and we want to avoid default. Can you tell me what hardship programs or payment options you offer? Ask for options. Would it be possible to lower the interest rate, reduce the monthly due for 3 months, or set up a temporary payment plan while we stabilize? Offer a concrete proposal. I can commit to X dollars per month if you can reduce the rate to Y% or waive late fees. If you will accept that, I'll make the payments today and set up automatic payments. Confirm details and follow up in writing. Can you confirm the agreement in an email and the date the new payment will be posted? Phrases that work. I want to resolve this and keep the account in good standing. We have a short-term hardship and a plan to stabilize. Would you work with us? If we can get a temporary rate reduction, we can make steady payments starting this month. 3. Basic investment concepts for beginners, practical, low friction. Emergency fund first, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in a safe liquid account. This protects your household and prevents high-interest borrowing. Retirement priority. Contribute to tax-advantaged accounts first, 401k, IRA. Capture employer matches, that's free return. Low-cost index funds. For most beginners, broad market index funds, total stock market, total bond market, provide diversified exposure with low fees. Regular contributions/dollar cost averaging. Set a fixed amount to invest monthly. Small, consistent habits beat rare big bets. Risk and time horizon. The longer the horizon, the more you can tolerate short-term swings. If you need money within 5 years, prefer safe instruments. Beware of high-fee funds and hot tips. If it sounds like a promise of quick riches, step back and consult a trusted advisor. Ethan and Anna's first investment move. They built a 3-month emergency fund, then opened an IRA and set up a $50 monthly automatic transfer into a broad index fund. It felt slow, and steady change was exactly the point. 4. Teaching children age-adapted. Toddlers, 2 to 5. 3 jars. Give, save, spend. Show the jars when money arrives and describe where each goes. School age, 6 to 12. Allowance for chores plus a small savings goal. Toy, book. Match a portion of savings to encourage discipline. Teens, 13 to 18. Give them partial control of a small budget, phone plan, outings. Teach basics, bank account, simple spreadsheet, why saving is important. Family rhythm. Involve kids in family giving decisions, which cost to support this month, and celebrate giving as a family value, not just a transaction. 5. Automatic generosity plan protects the heart and the checkbook. Decide a percentage for regular giving, start where faith and budget meet. Be honest and steady. Automate. Set up automatic transfers for giving and saving on the day pay arrives. Protect generosity. Separate the giving account or use scheduled transfers so the money never feels like discretionary.
Guard against resentment. Review quarterly whether your giving reflects your convictions and whether you need to adjust priorities in prayer. 6. Weekly and monthly rituals to keep stewardship alive. Weekly check, 15 minutes, Sunday evening. Update the 30-day budget, mark actuals, move buffer if needed, pray over finances for clarity and humility. Monthly review, 30 to 45 minutes. Reconcile accounts, update debt snowball progress, move automated transfers, adjust next month's plan. Quarterly spiritual audit, once every 3 months. Reassess giving commitments, long-term goals, and health of margins. Invite an accountability partner to review. 7. Negotiation scripts for asking for help without shame. Examples to say. To a neighbor or church. We're working on a plan to get stable and would be grateful for temporary help with groceries, childcare. We'll repay when we're able. To a vendor. We'd like to keep you as a supplier. Would you accept a short-term payment plan so we can continue doing business together? To family. This is hard to ask, but we're taking responsibility and have a plan. Would you consider a small loan or gift while we get back on our feet? Practical small wins to track. Week 1, set up the 30-day budget and transfer to the emergency fund. Week 2, call one creditor and negotiate one small relief. Week 3, set up one automatic transfer to giving and one to savings. Week 4, celebrate the month by naming 3 lessons learned and 1 gratitude note. A final scaffolding, covenant commitment applied. Write a covenant statement you will speak aloud each morning. E.g., Lord, our money is yours. Today we steward it with wisdom, generosity, and courage. Tie the sentence to a single, measurable action this week. Set up an automatic X transfer, call the creditor, or invite one friend into accountability. Ask someone you trust to pray with you and to receive a 1-sentence update each week.
Ethan slid a sticky note across the kitchen table with their covenant written in short, plain words. Anna taped it to the fridge. It wasn't lofty law, it was a daily compass. They began to speak it aloud together each morning, and each week they checked the budget, the snowball, and their small habitual transfers. Over time, the habit changed the heart. When you're ready, open your ledger, enter the numbers for 30 days, call the first creditor if needed, and set the automations for savings and giving. Keep your covenant simple. Stewardship isn't perfected in a single month. It is built by repeated, faithful acts that line up with the commitments you just made. Pause, pray, and then take the first small step you listed earlier. The work ahead is practical, but it is also spiritual. Every transfer, every payment, every gift is an act of worship when offered with a kingdom heart. The first month felt like a small drumbeat of obedience.
They set the automations and watched numbers move with a steadiness that felt almost holy. The emergency fund grew, not by leaps but by inches. The giving transfer left its mark on the balance and on their hearts. Each time a paycheck arrived, the distribution felt like prayer, an offering made before the spending began. It wasn't all smooth. In the 6th week, the old car threw a belt on a rainy Wednesday, and the mechanic's estimate made both of them breathe fast. For a moment, the budget grid looked sharp and brittle. Ethan closed his eyes and read the covenant aloud, the 3 short lines on the sticky note, then pulled up the negotiation script he'd practiced. We're working on a plan to get stable and would be grateful for temporary help with repair. We'll repay when we're able. He dialed the shop. The mechanic, a blunt but decent man named Marcus, listened. Marcus had raised 3 kids on an uneven income. He remembered being helped once, and he'd promised himself he'd do the same when he could. "All right," Marcus said. "I can break it into 2 payments and hold the car till Friday. And, Ethan, if you need, I'll put some of the parts on a slower ship. Don't let this keep you off the road." The relief was practical and humbling both. They used the same posture with the credit card company the following month. Anna, voice steady despite nerves, said, "We'd like to keep our account current. Would you accept a short-term payment plan so we can continue?" The representative offered a temporary interest reduction and a 2-month extension. Those small concessions felt like air under their wings. Small wins stacked into a new contour of ordinary life. The toddler still loved the jars, the clack of coins into the give jar a delighted percussion. The 6-year-old learned that waiting for the save jar grow. Then the satisfaction when the jar was empty and the prize came home. The teenager grumbled about having to track his part of the phone bill, but he also learned to trim app subscriptions and to value the increase in his bank balance when he chose a cheaper plan. Weekly checks became a sacred rhythm. On Sunday evenings, after the dishes and before a show or a walk, they sat at the kitchen table for 15 minutes. They opened the ledger, reconciled the small surprises, an overdraft fee here, a return check there, adjusted the 21-line 30-day budget, and named one thing to praise God for that week. They didn't pretend they had some perfect system. They celebrated that they were consistent. Consistency was the point. Quarterly audits were harder. Those were the times they invited honest friends to listen to the numbers and to the motives behind them. They called Pastor Miriam and their friend Lucas, a financial planner who had once been where they were. Miriam asked more about their giving than their balances. "How do you feel when you give?" she wanted to know. "Is it joy, obligation, something else?" Those questions were uncomfortable but clarifying. Giving, like every other discipline they were practicing, pulled up interior weeds that money tends to hide: fear, pride, shame. Once, during a quarterly review, Ethan admitted a private temptation. He had been keeping a spreadsheet outside the covenant, an if-only list of purchases he thought would make him feel secure: a newer truck, a better suit, a weekend of escape. Naming it out loud made the tug visible and smaller. Anna read the covenant line again: "Our money is yours. Today, we steward it with wisdom, generosity, and courage, and suggested a practical counter. They would save a small, separate joy fund for modest celebrations, not as indulgence, but as a guardrail. That tiny reframe kept him from trading their long-term margin for a quick thrill. Their decision to automate generosity changed how generosity felt. Because the giving transfer left before the discretionary money arrived, they never wrestled with an internal debate each month. The gift was already made. The choice had been exercised earlier in prayer and planning. Sometimes that meant giving to causes they'd never heard of before, a community pantry, a refugee family, a local scholars fund. Each transfer pulled their attention farther afield from the horizon of self. There were days of grief, too. Anna's mother faced a diagnosis that tightened everything: time, energy, money. They had to step in and help with travel and short-term caregiving. The covenant did not make them immune to crisis, but it gave them a posture. They reallocated the buffer, called the vendor they had been paying, and used the negotiation scripts to ask the vendor to spread a bill into smaller pieces. Community pitched in where it could. People brought meals, offered prayer, and occasionally an envelope on the doorstep. Those moments stitched the abstract practice of stewardship into the fabric of real mercy. As the year turned, tangible markers began to appear. The credit card with the highest interest was cleared. The emergency fund had enough to replace the roof gutter without a sleepless night. Their giving card showed donations that matched the heart they'd confessed. The kids understood stewardship as something they did, not only something they'd been told about in church. At the same time, the smallness of the numbers kept them humble. This was not a story of spectacular wealth, but of transformation in the margins. Ethan found himself talking about money differently with friends. Where he used to feel embarrassed, he now felt generous with what he'd learned. When a neighbor admitted that debt was a private shame she'd never told anyone, Ethan offered the script he'd used and the simple promise that they could call creditors together. It was a small network of accountability and resources that multiplied the effect of one family's covenant. Faith moved from slogan to habit. Prayer at the beginning of the month was now part of the budget ritual. They prayed for clarity before making a purchase, for humility before giving, for wisdom when negotiating. Certain episodes stood out. The Saturday they walked to the church's food pantry to assist rather than to hand over a check. The night they said no to an expensive vacation when they realized they could fund a medical need for someone else instead. Those refusals felt like moral muscles growing stronger. The children's practices surprised them. The toddler pointed at the give jar and insisted on dropping a sticker coin in when the family collected for the community garden. The teenager texted a picture of his saved balance to Anna, not for approval, but for the joy of sharing progress. The 6-year-old composed a drawing to give to a senior living neighbor and scrawled in earnest handwriting, "I saved for you." Those gestures showed that stewardship had become language in their home. At home, the covenant note remained taped to the fridge, edges soft from being often touched. On a quiet morning in late spring, sunlight tilted across the kitchen table in a long, warm rectangle. Ethan poured coffee. Anna opened the ledger. They looked over the numbers, nothing dramatic, but steady, and then at each other. There was a lightness in the air that had not been there a year before. The burdens were not gone, but they felt fewer. The ledger's rows read like small acts of faith. Anna smiled and said, "Remember when we thought we had to have everything figured out before we started?" Ethan laughed. "We would still be thinking." They spoke the covenant aloud, just as they had the first morning. The act had become ordinary, and that ordinariness was itself a victory, to worship in the mundane. Then Ethan reached for his phone to adjust one of the automatic transfers. There was a small increase they'd agreed to dedicate to a scholarship fund, and paused. He looked at Anna, who nodded. They tapped the confirmation together. Outside, the neighborhood stirred. A dog barked, a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the block. A child's shout rose like a punctuation. Inside, the ledger balanced.
The covenant was no longer simply words on a sticky note. It was the rhythm of their days. Each choice, each call to a vendor, each jar of coins was both practical and soulful, a training of hands and heart. For them, stewardship had lost its abstract intimidation and become a set of simple, repeatable acts. They had learned to protect generosity by making it automatic, to defend margins by being faithful to modest habits, and to confront fear by naming it aloud and asking for help. They had learned to celebrate small wins and to let the community carry what was heavier than they could bear. Ethan closed the ledger and took Anna's hand. "One more call?" he asked. It was nothing dramatic, just the routine of tending the system they'd built. But in that small movement was all the work, the disciplines, the prayers, the negotiations, the surrender. They rose together, steady and ordinary, ready to keep practicing the covenant that had reshaped how they handled money and how they loved one another. They left the kitchen with the sticky note fluttering on the fridge, sunlight catching the edges. The daily compass was still there, small, humble, faithful, pointing them onward.